People are worried about how we're going to feed people in the future generations because we're going to explode in, population size. But the fact of the matter is we're producing way more than enough food right now in this world to feed everyone, and we're still not able to feed everyone. It's a distribution problem, not a production problem. We're hoping that we can solve that distribution problem.
It's time to change the world.
There's got to be a better way.
It's time for something better.
You feel like you can't really make a difference, but the fact is that you can.
We're telling the stories of people who are changing the world and how you can help.
We just need more companies that are out there solving these problems.
Businesses, nonprofits, artists, and individuals who have found a problem and then created a solution.
If we want to have real impact, we have to do it together.
You'll come away from every episode with action steps you can take to be part of that solution.
We're never going to feel satisfied and happy if we just stay the same.
We can each change the world every single day.
People can actually come together and build a future for themselves along with other people.
Our daily actions have a massive impact. So what will we do about it? We can remake the world. Because guess what? We can. Hi everyone. I'm Nathan Gardner, and this is We Can Remake the World. For those of you who didn't catch our introductory episode, this is a podcast that will tell the stories of people who are changing the world, each in their own way, and how you can help. Every episode will feature the story of someone who created something that is making our world a better place. That might be a business, a nonprofit, a community project, a piece of art, or maybe something simpler. The size of the impact doesn't matter. What we're about here is shining light on the good in this world, because we believe there's a whole lot of it, and that it could use a little more attention. We want to tell more stories of potential, possibility, and empowerment to show that we can make a difference, each of us, in whatever way makes sense for us. There are people all over the world who are changing it for the better every day, and we want to inspire you with their stories and help you to make a positive impact where you are, based on your new understanding of whatever the topic was for each episode. We believe every single one of us has the power to make change every single day, and we want to be here to offer you resources, inspiration, and information to do just that. Our first guest is Robert Lee, co-founder and CEO of Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, or RLC for short. RLC is a nonprofit in New York City focused on ending hunger in the United States. And they believe that it's not only possible, it's not actually all that difficult. Robert's story and RLC's story are a perfect way for us to kick off our show, and we cannot wait to share it with you. Thank you so much for being here with us. If you enjoy our episode and our show, we'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to subscribe. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. Give us a review and a rating, which helps other people to find podcasts that are doing things that matter, that inspire or serve people in some way. Thank you so much. Every day in New York City, millions of lunches are served. According to 2018 census data, in a city of over 8 million people, roughly 4 million work in offices of some kind, and every day, millions of those employees purchase lunch. But not all of that food is eaten. In a report done by the National Resources Defense Council in 2017, it was found that 68% of discarded food in New York City was still edible. That's thousands of pounds of wasted food every day. In the United States, over 90 billion pounds of food is wasted every year. That's billion with a B. That's roughly 246 million pounds per day. And as you'll hear from Robert, co-founder and CEO of RLC and our guest today, a fraction of that amount could end hunger in the United States tomorrow for those who don't have secure access to food. While working at a tech startup in New York City, I helped out with lunch planning. We always had leftovers after our weekly team lunch, which was delivered through a catering service purchased by our company. It was good, fresh food, and we didn't feel good about wasting it every week. And we didn't know how to solve this food waste problem for ourselves. Then we found Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. Within 2 weeks of getting in touch with RLC, we had scheduled our first weekly pickup. All we had to do was put the lids back onto our leftover food and greet the food pickup volunteers when they came. That was it. It could not have been easier. In New York City alone, over 1.2 million people are food insecure, meaning they don't have enough to eat on a regular basis. So, after finishing his education at NYU's business school and spending some time in the workforce, Robert decided to do something about it. Robert and I met a few months ago to talk about what RLC is up to and about Robert's vision for a country without hunger. I hope you'll be as inspired by his story and what he's doing as I've been. So thanks for speaking with me today, Robert.
Of course.
I really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
So let's start with the basics. What is Rescuing Leftover Cuisine?
Sure. Rescuing Leftover Cuisine is a super long name, but it's an organization that brings leftover food to homeless shelters because there's so much food going to waste, right? If you think about the statistics, which are always, kind of crazy or sounds scary to kind of hear, and you can't really quite grasp the enormity of the problem, but 40% of the food that we produce in this country is going to waste. And a third of that is enough to eliminate the food insecurity problem in the U.S. So
just a third of that 40%.
Yeah, that's enough nutrition.
Wow.
To eliminate hunger. And to me, I mean, that's just ridiculous. It's just a huge shame that we just can't distribute it to people who need it and eliminate this really basic problem. And so what we do at Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, and sometimes we call it RLC for short, we essentially kind of engage the public as volunteers to bring excess food on foot or in a car or on their bike or whatever they have at their own disposal to kind of transport it to homeless shelters, soup kitchens, food pantries. And the way we coordinate all that, because there's so much logistics, we essentially use a web application and kind of provide all the details and logistics all via the platform.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you partner with someone to create that app for the volunteers?
I wish we did. We kind of stumbled around a lot and created like a minimum viable product at first that was very bare bones, no design elements at all. And then it evolved over time. It kind of became a Frankenstein of different developers who are volunteers coming in and creating one feature and tacking it on, and then another, and finally we were working with a group called Calippi Consulting. They essentially work with nonprofit organizations to help with their technologies, and they helped us a lot with kind of taking this Frankenstein of a code base, kind of streamlining it and allowing for kind of the next step to be taken to kind of add more features in a faster clip, because everything was streamlined and all the pieces were working together rather than just tacked on, one by one. Right now, it's just partnering with organizations that have the same kind of mission with us and working with them to get this going.
It's got to be so convenient for the volunteers to manage their shifts.
Yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible. And there are some pain points. I mean, there's always going to be things that we can improve, which is what we're working on. But in terms of, if we had humans doing this, we would have to have at least 3 times the size of our current staff to, manage all the logistics, send all the reminder emails, confirmation emails, provide all the instructions for the carts that are out there, and, the little things that go wrong or canceled or changes that happen during the holidays. It's just insane. And all that, luckily, is automated.
How many volunteers do you have working with you in New York City?
Yeah, we have, in terms of the number of people who have signed up on our platform, we have about 8,000.
Wow.
But not all of them volunteer, obviously, and many of them are not even active anymore. And so of the people who are really actually active, we have a really hardcore kind of group of maybe about 200 who are doing this on a monthly basis, and a core group of 50 who are doing it on a weekly basis. So there's a pretty long tail, if you will, of people that are involved in the organization. And we love that. It's easy for people to kind of jump in, jump out whenever they want.
How did you come up with this idea? What inspired you to create Rescuing Leftover Cuisine?
It's a kind of a long story, but I guess this
Go
is...
for it.
And honestly, it was an evolution. It wasn't really kind of wake up and do
An
this
epiphany.
kind of thing. Yeah,
This is what I will do.
It was definitely a long process, and I think it honestly started with my own kind of personal background of kind of experiencing food insecurity when I was a child. My parents were immigrants from South Korea, and when they came to the country, they had no idea what they were doing. They didn't know English. They went from job to job just trying to figure things out. My dad was a civil engineer. My mom was a bank teller in Korea, but none of that mattered here when they didn't know the language. So they essentially took whatever jobs they could, and my dad became a supermarket manager, and my mom was a homemaker. And so when I was a child, just growing up in Queens in New York, there were times when, we would just have one bowl of ramen, and that would be it for the entire day. And I just thought that was normal growing up. It kind of ruined my college experience. Man.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
No, but it was interesting. I mean, I guess the first time I kind of realized that it wasn't normal was when my parents started skipping meals, and then when I was going to school, it was crazy to see other students and other colleagues kind of throwing out bags of baby carrots that they didn't want to eat, and like the apples and stuff like that. And to me, I was like, man, this is insane. This is so much food waste, and people don't really think about where that food is coming from and what it really means. Although it's difficult, I'm kind of glad that I kind of went through that in a way, just because I do think about how lucky it is that I'm able to live here and have such convenient access to food. But yeah, I think it really started there. I grew up really with those values of cherishing food, realizing that food is life, not just for me, but also with animals or being slaughtered for this, food, and wasting that would be wasting that, basically, right?
The life that
I mean, it's just
that animal had.
It's insane that we don't really kind of think about that. We just take it for granted. But while I was growing up, I was lucky enough to go to Stuyvesant High School, which kind of focused me on my education. And
Is Stuyvesant in Queens?
No, it's actually in Manhattan, and that was a long commute, man.
Is that like a prep high school? Or
no, it's
like
public
that?
high school, which is pretty controversial nowadays because of the testing system that you have to kind of go through to get in. But yeah, it was a very intensive but rewarding experience that kind of really focused my kind of work ethic and helped me kind of realize what I wanted to do in a way, just because I while I was there, I realized I really like the applications of mathematics, and I wanted to kind of make a ton of money, so I chose finance. I actually interned at a hedge fund while I was in high school. And part of the reason why I wanted to do that was because I wanted to make sure that my family would not go through something like that again. And I also didn't want to pay for another, 4 years of schooling after undergrad. So yeah, I was lucky. I was lucky enough to become a Gates-Mann Scholar, which paid for all of my 4 years of undergrad as well. And so went to Stern, NYU. And NYU was really where I kind of came across the concept of food rescue. There was a club that brought leftover dining hall food to homeless shelters. It was called Two Birds, One Stone. And it was pretty
Two birds, one stone.
Yeah, kind of like the two birds of like the food waste problem and the hunger problem being knocked out by, the one stone of the student movement and that kind of thing. And it's pretty amazing.
And
I loved it.
we have the resource to help solve the problem.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And anyone can get involved, right? Like any student could just go pick up the food from a dining hall and walk it over to a homeless shelter. We actually used the NYU bus sometimes, and that was amazing. I mean, it was kind of opened my eyes to the fact that this was not illegal, because there was a Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act of 1996 that protected food donors from legal liability, except in the case of gross negligence, which is obviously just like extreme carelessness. Like if you throw the food on the ground, you're gonna be like,
hopefully, yeah. So talk a little bit more about that. So
sure.
Is that a New York State specific thing?
It's a federal.
So wow. So anywhere around the country,
that's right.
Food preparers are protected for donating their food.
That's correct.
Wow.
In good faith, yeah. And it's, it just makes sure that people are comfortable with donating food, right? Yeah. And it's
so
crazy.
Your program could be implemented anywhere in the country.
Yeah. And it should be everywhere.
Wow.
Food rescue really should be universal. It should be the standard rather than the exception. And that's what we're striving for with Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. So that club really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that students and people could be the solution, and transporting it was really the biggest issue. The food donors wanted to do it. The homeless shelters needed the food but didn't have the capacity to go and get it themselves. And so, everyday people can just go in and be that solution. And so at that point, during the 4 years of college, we didn't really have a technology-driven solution. We did everything by hand. We did, things on Google spreadsheets. We sent emails manually.
Builds character, as they say.
I guess so. We just didn't know or think of a better way, to be honest. But it kind of opened their eyes to the fact that we could do something like this on a more automated level. And in my senior year, after I had signed my life away to JP Morgan and accepted a full-time offer there, I really started thinking about kind of what my life would be like after college, which probably is a little too late, to be honest. That probably should have happened way before then. But I realized I didn't ever want to give up what I was doing at Two Birds, One Stone. And I wanted it to be a part of my life because I really do think it's because of my personal background and kind of, why I was even involved in the first place, of the fact that it was such an elegant solution and it kind of hit home to my own values of, growing up. And when I kind of had the opportunity to kind of expand this beyond the borders of NYU, I took that chance and kind of, entered into a venture competition with the name Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, which is supposed to be a placeholder name, which ended up sticking. But essentially took this concept of Two Birds, One Stone, brought it outside the borders of NYU, by working with actual kind of for-profit food businesses that can get incentives, and they can get enhanced tax deductions for the food that they donate. We help them with their tax forms. We help them provide proof for the donations, walking through the steps of calculating that value.
How is that calculated?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty complicated process, but essentially it's the lower of twice your basis cost, which is the raw materials cost of the food, or your half your profit margin plus your basis cost. So it's the lesser of either of those two, and essentially you take that value and you write it off as a deduction.
So some percentage of the cost of the food in the first place.
Exactly. So I mean, at the worst case scenario, you get 50% more than what you would normally get in just cost of goods sold. And so for the food businesses, they can actually, see a bottom line impact on this. They can actually get some good, meaningful cost savings on the tax side. So, incorporating that into it, incorporating the element of reducing your food disposal costs as well, because as you know, every commercial business has to pay for their own garbage disposal. And so if you can reduce that, then you can reduce the cost of your garbage disposal. And positive kind of marketing and advertising and foot traffic that we're bringing to the location. So kind of combining those things and providing a value proposition for the food donor partners. At that point, we actually didn't charge yet. We did everything for free. And then kind of automating the process to allow for technology to kind of make it a more scalable solution. So that's what we entered into and got some seed money. We actually didn't even win first place. We won runner-up and had a small amount of money to kind of use. And so we set up the organization, set up all the the filings, set up the domain, and that's how we got started.
For anybody who doesn't exist in the business world, what is seed money? How did that contribute to the start of your business?
Yeah, I mean, it was crucial. Otherwise, we would definitely not be here. We were the venture competition that we participated in was called the NYU Reynolds Changemaker Challenge, and they provided seed money to basically provide for our domain and setting up all our filings.
So an early stage investment.
Exactly.
Is that for NYU students, or is that?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was only for NYU students that were looking to kind of solve a social issue.
That's a great model in and of itself.
Definitely.
I mean, just university donors creating an endowment for people who want to make positive change.
For sure.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
What was the name one more time?
NYU Reynolds Changemaker Challenge.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Also, I think this is such a great example of the way that technology can be used to uplift programs like yours and
Definitely.
programs in society. Technology can have pitfalls, but it can also just simplify and lower cost in ways for creative people who are just trying to get started and build something. And it's really exciting to hear how that contributed to
it just makes it so much more efficient.
Yeah.
And I do think that like nonprofits in general are just, unfortunately, because nonprofits are under-resourced, are a bit behind on kind of using and leveraging technology. And one of the things that I would love to be more a part of is kind of thinking about how Rescuing Leftover Cuisine will be impacted by future technologies, right? And one of the things that, I would love to kind of spend more time thinking about and kind of working on specifically is how the automated vehicle space will kind of disrupt the entire system, the entire, like all food rescue organizations and food banks and, the whole system, to be honest. And thinking about how, all those different technologies can really make a really positive impact in our space and how we should be leveraging that, and preparing for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot with technology that we would love to do.
So I'd love to hear more about the organizations that you serve, the shelters, and do you work primarily with homeless shelters? Are there other groups that you donate to?
Yeah, so we started off working with a lot of homeless shelters, and then expanded into working with soup kitchens, food pantries, food banks, and many different types of kind of human services agencies, which is now what we kind of call it, and acronymized it to HSA. But yeah, they range from the Bowery Mission, New York Common Pantry, St. John's Bread and Life, St. Paul's, and things like that. So there's a lot of food pantries within churches and a lot of homeless shelters, both private and government funded.
Sure. And as far as the scale of the operation today, are you in primarily New York City? Do you have operations around the country as well?
Yeah, we have. We're primarily here in New York City, and we want to continue to expand here before we kind of grow meaningfully in other cities. But we do have other smaller satellite branches in cities across the nation. It was a natural fit just because we had partners here that wanted to expand into other cities, and we had people that were interested in volunteering and helping out. And so we just kind of made the connection and had them research, human services agencies that could use that food. So it was a very easy way for us to kind of make impact in other places. Typically, the hardest part is convincing the food donor partner. So it almost felt like a shame to kind of let that go and not have it just go to waste. But it does, what we're kind of thinking about right now is really thinking about how we can streamline our resources to make the biggest impact. And one of the things that we didn't really think about was the fact that our resources get thinned out and spread out when we think on a national level. And right now we're really focusing on New York City and making a huge impact here before making more meaningful steps to make huge or larger impact in other cities.
Yeah, and making an impact in New York City is no small small thing.
Yeah,
a city of this size with the
definitely.
number of homeless people.
Definitely.
Do you have any numbers off the top of your head as far as, say, the number of pounds of food or the number of meals you provide and the number of folks that you've served?
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, we have always been looking to continue to grow and expand very quickly. And so we were very excited to announce just last month that we're on track to doubling our number of pounds of food that we're rescuing and the number of meals that we're providing. So just as context, in the very first year that we rescued food, it was about 52,000 pounds of food in that
that's
first
still
year.
Pretty huge. What year was that?
That was 2013.
Okay.
And then when we kept on kind of growing, and I went full-time in 2014 after leaving JP Morgan. In 2018, last year, for the full year of 2018, we rescued 1 million pounds of food in that year alone. And that was a great milestone. And then in 2019 here, right now in the first 6 months of this year, we've rescued another additional 1 million pounds of food. So we're on track to really doubling again this year. We're hoping to, keep up this pace of growth. It's definitely, harder and harder to keep it up as you kind of get bigger and bigger. But, we want to continue to keep on trying and, expanding.
Well, what I love about it is that you have a hunger for growth because you believe in your mission and your growth isn't driven by profit margins, it's driven by impact, but you still have the same level of commitment to that growth.
Definitely.
It's, I think, applying a business mindset and that sort of desire for expansion to a model like this is so exciting.
Thanks. And I feel like there needs to be more of this. And,
the more of them there are, the more momentum, the more awareness. It's just gonna catch, and it's just gonna spin out from there.
We hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. Would you speak a bit more about the sources of food, the companies or restaurants, I would guess, that you're partnering with?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the businesses which offer their leftovers to you?
Sure. Yeah, it's surprising. I mean, we at first thought there was just going to be a lot of restaurants, a lot of different cafes and things like that, but it's been quite a mix. We maybe work with about 30% of our partners are restaurants, and then another 30% are actually cafeterias within office buildings. And it's, it makes sense. I mean, when I was working at JP Morgan, there was a cafeteria within our building that, served breakfast, lunch, and it would just be like so much food. It would be like kind of a buffet area where, it would just be kind of sitting in a hot holding area and probably would go to waste at the end of the day. And it just is surprising to think how many kitchens are even within commercial looking buildings and how much food can be rescued from those kind of locations. So, and then the rest are all kinds of different places, catering companies, even production companies. And it's surprising to kind of think a lot of our bigger partners are obviously, the restaurants like Proper Food and Blue Park Kitchen and things like that, which are great. But there's also less kind of retail and customer facing inside of businesses that are food establishments as well, like Kettlebell Kitchen or different types of food businesses that like Great Performances and those kind of things. And it's really great that they're also thinking about how to reduce their food waste and make sure that they are a part of the community and helping out.
Another aspect of what I love about Rescuing Leftover Cuisine is I happen to work for a company which is a client of RLC.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, no, it's our pleasure. And we're not a large company, so the fact that it's low cost for us financially and very easy to do is a huge deal. And we can participate. You meet your clients, so to speak, where they are, which I think is really great because it just opens the door for anybody to participate, which is so important. And if you think about the number of lunches that are catered around this city every day for businesses, it's a huge amount of food. There are always going to be leftovers. Yeah. Always.
And they're always catering more than they need. And, it's just common sense.
And it's no longer a problem if there are organizations in place like yours which can just bridge the gap so that, okay, we have more than we need, but we have somewhere to put it.
Exactly.
I think
and we come pick it up.
Yeah. And speak more about that process because you really do make it so easy. So
we try to.
Yeah.
We try to make it as easy as possible just because we know that there's always going to be some excuse or some barrier that you can always put up. And so we try to make it as easy as possible. And so for food businesses that are restaurants, for example, we tell them, hey, when you're closing, when you're basically packing up the food anyways to throw it out, instead of packing it up to throw it out, pack it up to donate it. It's the same amount of time. And, we'll be in and out of your hair, very easy and super efficiently. So, we asked them and asked the food donor partner, when do you normally, throw out your excess food? And when do you normally have that process in place? And so that we can slip into their process without kind of changing their habits. And that way make the change really simple. And then even on kind of that level, we also kind of automated to the point where we don't even need technology because we tell them, hey, like what schedule works for you on a recurring basis to have us, come by without you even letting us know. Like we'll just show up every day at 7 p.m. if that's what you want, or every Monday, every Tuesday, whatever you want. And, that kind of creates that other habit of, just expecting us to be there. And then we just have to make sure that we're actually there. And I think that's also part of it. Like part of the kind of reason why food rescue is not universal is the fact that this service is not as professional as it should be as of yet. And, we're trying to basically make sure that we are providing that level of service to ensure that if they're putting the time and effort to make, on their part work, then we have to be there. We have to show up. We have to, be on time, and we have to be professional as well. So, that's why I do think that, the growth is kind of building to the momentum of having this be completely universal, hopefully.
Well, I think you're really setting the foundation for a sustainable model that could be scalable with that goal. And I think it almost seems like your time at JP Morgan perfectly prepared you to be aware of every possible obstacle so that you can create a really viable solution to companies of all sizes and organizations of all sizes.
Yeah. I'm definitely grateful to my experience at JP Morgan. I definitely would not, have been able to do a lot of the things that, we've done without that experience. So I definitely, my experience at JP Morgan was actually pretty great. And yeah, I think the work wasn't very impactful, but I think, it definitely was very educational.
Yeah, and the skills you'll have gained there, just
definitely.
being in that business setting will,
Definitely.
serve you with everything you're building now.
Definitely.
Talk more about the transition period as you were so you built Rescuing Leftover Cuisine while you were still working at JP Morgan, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, so we actually started right before I started at JP Morgan. Paul, Louisa, and I got together on weekends, and
are those your sort of co-founders?
Yeah, exactly. We got started. We actually met at like Paul's house in Queens, and then transitioned to meeting in Midtown once I started working. Once we all of us started working, and essentially worked on it on the side while we were all working full time. And then at the 1 year mark, we realized, either we have to hire a person to kind of take this forward, or kind of, have a person go full time amongst the three of us, or just, split it up. Yeah, I decided to kind of, take the risk and give it a shot.
What are some of the biggest obstacles that you all faced as you were getting started?
Ooh, there were a lot. I think a lot of it was inflicted, in that I guess there were a lot of things that we didn't really think about or know how to do. Creating the technology and expanding it was definitely a challenge. Building the first network of volunteers was also a challenge. And then managing my own time, I definitely had a difficult time of kind of balancing my desire to kind of make impact with what is actually useful or helpful to the organization. So I, for example, just loved doing rescues and loved doing pickups and things like that. And, it's always rewarding to kind of be at the homeless shelter and be thanked and be with volunteers who love the program and things like that. But, what probably was more impactful or better use of my time was actually being in the office and working on things that were not as pleasant, like asking for money or asking, getting more partners and getting rejected by them. I think, definitely a lot of challenges.
So I would like to ask, what do your folks think about what you're doing?
Oh, man. To be honest, when I told them that I was going to quit my job at JP Morgan to do this full time, they thought I was joking. They ignored me, and I kept on telling them. And then when I actually quit my job, they stopped talking to me for 6 months. So I quit my job in July of 2014, and I still remember it. And it was hilarious. I mean, they just would stop talking to me, and then during Thanksgiving, they talked to me, but they pretended like nothing happened. Yeah, no, it was. I mean, they just thought I was, throwing everything away, and they sacrificed a lot to get here, right? And they sacrificed a lot for me to kind of pursue my education and kind of, land a job at JP Morgan, right? And they were worried, I guess, that, all of that would just kind of go to waste and end up being for nothing. But the way I see it and the way I kind of described it to them was the fact that they sacrificed literally everything, their family, their friends, everything that they knew, to come to this country to provide the opportunity for me and my brother to have the set of opportunities that exist here. And part of that set includes taking the risk to start an organization that will have this much impact, that will help people like us. I think it really kind of only dawned on them what we were doing when we were finally highlighted on CNN and like different news. They were all of a sudden like, "Hey, look at what Robert's doing."
Nice.
Yeah, it was kind of a 180 degree.
How long did that take before
I think it was like 1 year out.
Okay.
Yeah. It was pretty funny, but it was
I'm
good.
sure they're insanely proud now. Talk a bit more, if you would, about organizations like City Harvest, which you've mentioned, which is an organization in New York City which does sort of larger scale food collection.
Yeah,
is
they
that
do great
correct?
work. Yeah.
And there are organizations maybe around the country that people have heard of that do something like this. Dunkin' Donuts, I think, is known for donating there. So talk more about the gap that you fill, where those organizations which have a certain threshold of quantity of food, they can't make an impact below a certain amount of donation. Yeah. Are there any other organizations doing what you're doing to fill that gap?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it really comes down to kind of making the most impact with the limited dollars that nonprofits have. And it's actually, it makes a lot of sense and is admirable that, City Harvest and Food Bank are also kind of, focusing in on what they're good at and doing that well. We had talked to City Harvest, we talked to Food Bank, homeless shelters, restaurants, everyday people, and we knew that there was a gap in the food rescue space, that City Harvest and Food Bank wouldn't go buy for anything below, at that point, 50 pounds of food. And they've since raised it to 100 pounds of food. And so there are restaurants that want to donate their food, but don't have the means to. They don't know where to donate the food to. And what that also means is that there is a gap that is smaller volume but maybe higher frequency, where restaurants and other food businesses that have lower than that minimum pound requirement can be filled by people like you and I, who can rescue it along the way home or along their way to work or between classes or whatever they have going on. They can just easily sign up online and just make some impact.
So how do volunteers get the food from point A to point B?
So they use whatever they have at their own disposal. In New York City, a lot of people just walk. They just carry the food in bags, boxes, aluminum tins, and they just walk it over. In our other branches, people drive, and it's probably a lot easier. But yeah, there's some people that bike here. People load it into kind of folding carts, and then they walk it over.
Great.
Yeah, super local, and you can really get to see the city too.
Do you sort of intentionally partner with local organizations based on the location of those who are donating? So is it sort of broken into segments within the city?
Yeah, exactly. So the two kind of main criteria that we base the matching off of is the proximity and the need. So it's the closest human service agency that would need and use the food fully.
What do you see for Rescuing Leftover Cuisine as it grows? You've mentioned it a bit, but what's your vision for the impact that this can have?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of daunting and a little scary, but the goal is really to be universal and have it so that it has the capacity to work with every single food establishment in New York City. There's enough food going to waste from just the food establishments in New York City that it would eliminate the food meal gap problem. So, the food that is currently going to waste from our food establishments only represents about a third of the food waste happening. A lot of food waste is happening on the consumer level, from people's houses. A lot of food is happening from kind of the further back on the supply chain level of wholesalers and things like that. But even just focusing on the retailers and the food establishments in New York City, we can eliminate food insecurity. The amount of food that's going to waste from just that segment is exactly equal to the number of meals people are currently skipping. So our goal is to specifically target that, keep on growing so that we can work with every single food establishment in New York City. And at some point we, want to kind of move towards kind of more, I guess, legislative action and having more incentives to do this, but also just mandating it. And a lot of cities are kind of moving towards this already. And obviously France has taken a big step in kind of taking the lead on that.
What is France
So
done?
Supermarkets in France are required and mandated by law to donate their excess food. And
all throughout France.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's really... it's incredible, and it really kind of leads and sets the example for other countries to do the same and really take food waste as a huge problem. And I think a lot of people don't really know this, but food waste is obviously not just a moral problem of people kind of going food insecure, but also animals being slaughtered, but it's also an environmental issue. And, it's the fact that we use half of the U.S. land, 80% of fresh water, and 10% of our energy budget to produce food. And then we waste 40% of that. So the fact that we're putting in natural resources to create this food and then bring it to our tables and then we throw it out is a huge environmental drain. But it's also, after you throw it out, it goes to landfills, where it doesn't get to kind of go through normal processes it goes through in nature, and essentially emits methane gases, which are 30 times worse for the environment than carbon dioxide. And so, people that are environmentally cautious and thinking about their carbon footprint can really have the opportunity to make an impact 3 times a day, and essentially, think about what we can do to reduce our food waste at home even.
If there's one thing I'll never forget about speaking with you today, I think it's the number you shared toward the beginning, that 1/3 of the 40% of food that we waste could feed every hungry
That's
person
right.
in the United
Exactly.
States. That is a huge number.
It's insane. It's
I
the same
mean,
thing with the
not
world.
huge in the sense of necessarily, but just it's big in the just it just blows my mind.
It's insane. It's ridiculous, and it's the same thing on a global level. Like people are worried about how we're going to feed people in the future generations because we're going to explode in population size. But the fact of the matter is, we're producing way more than enough food right now in this world to feed everyone, and we're still not able to feed everyone. It's a distribution problem, not a production problem. We're hoping that we can solve that distribution problem.
What do you think is the next step so that with food scarcity, we move beyond what everybody thinks of as people who need support when it comes to food, like homeless shelters or food banks, and it moves more into a community focus for folks who may not raise their hand and say, I need this very easily?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step, honestly, is community engagement, for people to kind of see the problem firsthand and to get involved in their own communities. It's shocking how many homeless shelters, soup kitchens, and human service agencies are like right next to us. I lived in a dorm at NYU that was literally right across the street from a homeless shelter. Maybe I'd say 70% of the occupants and the students that were living in that dorm did not even know. And while they were moving out, they were throwing out food, books, mattresses, furniture, clothing, and all of that could have gone literally right across the street. And that's why I think the first step is that community engagement, just awareness and knowing that you can donate across the street, that you can make a difference. And we see a lot of our volunteers kind of come out and volunteer, see how easy it is, and also find out where their local homeless shelter is. And all of a sudden start to donate their clothing and start to donate books, all kinds of other things, and provide even their time to help people with their finances, or help them with computer skills and job skills training. And I think it really is that first step of taking the step to get engaged in your community.
That's big. It's almost a mind shift to see everything you have that you no longer need as a resource for someone else.
Exactly.
Anything that could possibly be of value to somebody, just do a quick search online and find someone who might be able to take it off of your hands.
Exactly.
If there's one thing you wish people knew about food scarcity, what would it be?
Man, I think there's a lot of things, but if there's one thing, I guess it's that people can make an impact, right? That it's such a big, hairy, scary problem that you think you can't really do much about, and you don't really know what the face of food insecurity looks like, and you feel like you can't really make a difference. But the fact is that you can, and that you can sign up to volunteer. Again, rescuingleftovercuisine.org/calendar. All the opportunities are right there in front of you. Sign up for an account and you just sign up and go. You can actually do it same day if you want to. And it is really powerful for us to kind of have the power of the people kind of making an impact on this in a direct way, so that people know that they can be a part of this, and that is really needed. To me, I think, I've become more and more comfortable, I think, sharing my own personal story over time. And I think, people don't really think about the fact that like there are working poor who are, literally just trying to make ends meet and doing everything they can. Sometimes when you think about food insecurity, you think about someone that might be lazy, who might not be, deserving of anything. And the fact of the matter is that it's sometimes people who are retired, who have paid taxes all their lives, who are elderly and, they can't get a job, and they now are relying on food assistance programs to eat. It's people who are children who can't get a job, who are, faced with this impossible situation. I'd say, it sounds scary and it sounds impossible, but we can solve it. We can all make a difference is the one thing I'd say.
Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Robert.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's been really great.
Thank you.
I mean, how inspiring is Robert? Robert's perspective is so unique and valuable, I think, because not only has he seen food insecurity from the inside as someone who experienced it while he was growing up, but he's seen the solution take shape while he was in school, as he's built his nonprofit. So who better to believe when they say they know we can end this problem? Robert's someone we should listen to. Follow his example, take his guidance, be part of the solution that he's building. Let's get into our key takeaways from today's episode. What we call the 3 changemakers. 3 ideas that could change our minds and change our world. Changemaker number 1 that I'll carry forward from my conversation with Robert. We can solve hunger just by changing the systems we already have in place. The solution's right in front of us. I love what Robert said about how hunger is not a production problem, it's a distribution problem. You actually hear this echoed by a lot of experts and researchers who look at food supply and food insecurity. According to an article published in 2013 by a research team at the University of Minnesota, there are huge inefficiencies in our food system. This research team focused specifically on how we're feeding livestock and how we produce energy with biofuel. These practices are wasting resources because we're funneling so much grain and water into raising livestock and producing energy with biofuel. And there are ways that we could make those processes more efficient, ways that we could funnel those resources toward people. According to this article, we could feed as much as an additional 4 billion people. This would end hunger. It's estimated that roughly 2 billion people around the world are food insecure. So if we could feed 4 billion more by just changing the systems we already have, problem solved. We'll post a link to this article on the RLC episode page at wecanremaketheworld.com if you're interested in reading more. Changemaker number 2. We waste a lot of food, and if we stop wasting that food, we could change the world. The problem is not that we do not have enough food to feed the world. It's that we funnel those food resources selectively. We put them only in certain places, and don't necessarily make the best use of the food we have. You often hear that nature never wastes. Everything in nature is used, reused, eaten, turned into something else, which is why it's a perfect example of balance, of give and take, of an efficient system. Robert and RLC want to take a page out of nature's book and make use of everything in our food system to the benefit of all, so that we're not wasting anything, just like nature. You also heard Robert talk about the environmental impact of waste and what that food waste does when it's not allowed to break down naturally, when it's placed into landfills, for example. This produces methane in large amounts, and methane is a much more harmful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, so it's something we should certainly pay attention to and give some thought to. Number 1, what can we do to lessen our food waste? Number 2, what can we do with that food waste? And how can we improve our systems so that we're dealing with it in a more natural way? And changemaker number 3, which I'll definitely carry with me after my conversation with Robert, is that the face of food insecurity is not always visible on the surface. I have so much respect for Robert for telling us his story. We often think of food insecurity as impacting only certain groups of people who feel like they're removed from us, sort of physically or socially. The homeless, citizens of third world countries who are far away, people in shelters, or those who require assistance through welfare programs. But the face of food insecurity is not so easily categorized. It's estimated that between 35 and 40 million Americans are food insecure. That's about 10% of the population, actually a little more. You may have gone to school as a child with someone whose family was food insecure. You were sitting right next to them in class, but you likely would never have known. It's easy to assume that everyone around you has what they need based on what you see on the outside, but that's not always an accurate assumption. What we've learned from Robert is that there is no real reason why we cannot feed everyone who needs greater access to food. Robert shows us one piece of the solution through RLC, which has huge potential. And there are other pieces that can contribute to a solution as well. For example, the resources we have in grain and in water, which we invest in meat production, could be funneled toward those in need, simply if we all ate a little bit less meat. Food waste can be donated, like in the case of RLC. Grocery stores could make it common practice to donate all of their leftover food, or food which is almost on the brink of expiring. It could become law to do this, as it is in France, where grocery stores are mandated to donate their food so that none of it is wasted. Or this could be done by choice, so that all of a grocery store's unused produce or meat or eggs could find their way toward a shelter which can distribute it to those who need it. There are many solutions. It just takes a commitment to finding, building, and growing those solutions, and pioneers like Robert and RLC to show us the way. There's no limit to the impact we can make if we just take that first step of creating something new. Robert is a great example of someone who saw a problem, recognized a solution, and committed to making it a reality. He knows this is a problem we can solve because he's watching it happen every day. He's seeing people get what they need by taking resources that we already have. Let's help Robert solve it by supporting him and supporting RLC and creating our own version of that solution or participating in whatever way we can. I can't shake that statistic that we explored before the interview, that 1/3 of the food we waste, which is 40% of the food we produce, could end hunger in the United States tomorrow. The answer is right in front of us. Let's do something about it. Here's what you can do today. Become more aware of your food waste and make a commitment to bring that number as close to zero as you can. If you're an employee of a company that's wasting food, take it upon yourself to research organizations like RLC in your area that could collect and donate those leftovers. Another simple step that you can take right now is to make a commitment to not waste anything. This includes food, but also includes other goods like clothing. Get on Google and do a quick search for local homeless and human services shelters. Find out what they need or what they collect, and make it a point to donate everything you can, from food to toys to cars to clothes. Look at everything you have as a resource that might benefit someone else, because it often is. Organize a regular donation program in your community, at your school, in your office or place of work. Or if you're a student, check out NYU's Two Birds, One Stone, which Robert told us about and which inspired him to create RLC. Two Birds, One Stone is still running, actually, and could be a model for you on your campus to take leftover dining hall food and deliver it to those in need. And finally, I think Robert actually gave us the best example of the action we can take right now, which is to understand that we can be part of the solution. And it starts with awareness around the food that we're wasting and making a decision to make a change. For this episode's challenge, we would like to ask you sometime in the next 2 weeks, before our next episode is released, to make a donation of any kind. Whatever you have. Whether it's canned food, clothing, find an organization near you that accepts whatever you have to give and bring it to them. Maybe this is children's toys. Maybe it's toiletries. You can sometimes purchase new toiletries in travel size and donate those to organizations that need to provide toothbrushes, toothpaste, deodorant to folks in need. You'll be doing the same work that RLC is doing, bringing something of value to someone who needs it. Jump onto our Facebook page and post your donation. What organizations did you find in your community? What surprised you? Was this easy for you? Was it tough to find an organization that was close by? Let us know what your experience is. Share your donation in your Instagram story. Inspire others to donate as well. And give us a tag at We Can Remake the World and RLC2 at Rescuing Leftover Cuisine on Instagram. Why not be part of the solution today? If you'd like to get involved directly with RLC, visit their website at www.rescuingleftovercuisine.org. You can sign up to volunteer in New York City or volunteer as a food rescuer with branch chapters in Los Angeles, Austin, Texas, Nashville, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Atlanta, Dallas, and others. If you don't have access to a food donation in your local area, whether it's RLC or another similar organization, consider starting one. Do a little research and use RLC as your model. Like Robert said, just ask questions and you'll get the help you need. I'm sure Robert would be happy to speak with anyone who's inspired by his example and would want to create a similar program. If you're a food service or events organization that regularly serves food, a restaurant, catering company, corporate cafeteria, or a hotel, and you'd like to partner with RLC in New York City or one of the other cities we mentioned to donate your leftovers, reach out to them at info@rescuingleftovercuisine.org. That's their direct email. And a reminder, you're protected by the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act of 1993 when donating any leftover food in good faith. So don't worry about any liability, and remember that there are tax benefits to these food donations through RLC as well, which might help to incentivize the program if your boss is asking for some justification. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you feel inspired, and we hope you'd like to hear more stories like this one to get even more inspired. If so, tell people about us. Subscribe to We Can Remake the World on Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, give us a rating, and help others to find these stories too. The more ratings and reviews that Apple Podcasts sees, the more they share new podcasts so that that podcast can grow. Same if you listen on Spotify, Google Play, SoundCloud. Give us some love and a share. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers. Let's get everyone inspired about the positive impact that we can have every day. Visit us at wecanremaketheworld.com for news and updates and resources on each of our episode pages, and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at wecanremaketheworld, or Twitter, WCRTW Podcast. Let us know what you thought of today's episode. How did it blow your mind or open your mind or change the way you think about something? And if you know someone inspiring that we should talk to, or if there's a business or nonprofit that's doing amazing work in the world that you love, send us an email about them so we can reach out and get them on the show. podcast@wecanremaketheworld.com. I love hearing about and telling these stories. It is my favorite thing, so I'm happy to hear about as many as you've got. Let's keep sharing these stories and building this community of people who are excited about the potential and the positivity out there. Let's change the world. Let's remake it into something better. I'm Nathan Gardner, and this is We Can Remake the World. Because guess what? We can. Our theme song was composed by Peter Pearson. Our logo was designed by my buddy Andrew Hodge. Thanks so much to my friends who gave their feedback for these first couple episodes, and to Robert, our guest today. We're excited to share our next story with you. Tune in 2 weeks from today, every other Monday. Until then.